can't imagine a more important time than today for feminist liberation and theologians to meet in the world. Nor can I imagine a more timely topic that we have for our discussion today, intersectionality and political activism. Given the results of the U.S. elections and the trajectory of oppression that we face in this country and with similar nationalistic movements around the world. So on behalf of myself and Elizabeth Fiorenza and Diane New and folks at Water, I thank you for joining us and for being part of this discussion. Thank you for the work that you do to oppose the forces that have become yet more visible, the stresses and death-dealing ways that we are becoming familiar with. We face injustice for a living, many of us. And in some cases, we face injustice for a dime. And so none of this is new to us. Susan and I were saying we've been here before. Some, I think, had hoped, perhaps naively, that we could see that matters of racism and sexism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, heterosexism, and many other things we'll talk about this afternoon had long been settled, or at least were on the road to being settled. Now, I think, no such luck. Our work in feminist liberation theology, then, is more necessary than ever, and so, too, is it important to join in this network. So I would ask you to just take about 15 seconds to say thank you to someone who's sitting near you for the work that they're doing to make things different. The Feminist Liberation Theologians Network started in 1995 with an idea that a couple of us had. Elizabeth, I'm looking at you. And the first meeting at the AAR-SBL was in 1997 in San Francisco. We have been meeting faithfully now for 20 years. There is a Google list that we use during the year. We will pass around the sign-up sheet. Feel free to use the Google list yourself. If you want to post to it, you will post to all these people and lots of others. So it's a wonderful list, and you can post to it without any refereeing. We are sponsored by Water, the Women's Alliance for Theology, Ethics, and Ritual, which is in Silver Spring, Maryland. The newsletter for Water is on your chair. I invite you to take it and enjoy it, read it, and of course we invite your support for Water. Water does not operate by magic, but by money, and so we invite all of you to support the work of Water, as you have done, so many of you. So we are so grateful for your faithful support of the last almost 35 years of Water. So please continue to do that, and others who have not had an opportunity to have the honor and privilege of supporting Water, this would be your lucky day. And we really do need your support, and it does keep our organization going. We're not funded by large grants and huge donations, but in fact, most of our funding does come from people like you. In recent years, we here at the Feminist Liberation Theologians Network have looked at the word feminist, the word liberation, the word theology. We have deconstructed those and offered our own ideas. We have looked at gender-based violence. Free Fortune, you were a part of that. We have looked at what we can do to eradicate it. We have looked at feminist liberation theology and the arts, which is what we did last year. And this year we turn to the political, not a day too soon. Once again, we're happy to be in collaboration with the Women's Caucus. They will continue today's discussion tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in session A19, 105, Agitating Boundaries, Intersectionality and Political Action. That will continue the work of this conversation with 3 papers by some people here present. And there will be conversation about this session and about those papers. And in fact, it will unite, Elizabeth Hirstick is with us, it will unite Tracy Ducar and others, it will unite the 2 sessions once again in what we hope will be a sustained conversation about not only agitating boundaries, but the intersectionality and political action necessary to move us through these difficult days. I will represent the Feminist Liberation Theologians Network, but if anybody else, I'm begging, would join me tomorrow morning to report on this session, please see me afterwards and let me know, and we can figure out how to share that responsibility tomorrow. So if anybody would like to do that, you're more than welcome to. In fact, I need you to do that. It would be fun. So that will be tomorrow morning. Here's what we do at the Feminist Liberation Theologians Meeting. If this is your first time, and even if it isn't, I'll refresh your memory. We now go around the circle. And I know you're looking, oh my God, yes, we're going to have, everybody's going to say hello. And it's going to be very fruitful because we'll hear from each person. And then we will turn to introductions by Elizabeth Fiorenza of our 3 speakers. They will have 7 or 8 minutes to make a presentation. We will, after their talks, move into small group discussion, and then we'll come back for a plenary. So there will be plenty of time for you to be involved, but also time to hear from our speakers who have given consideration to these matters as we start our conversation. So we will begin with the introductions, and I ask you just to give your name and if you want a word of affiliation, but mostly I want to know something, or we want to know something about where you're involved in terms of intersectional work in politics. So just say something about that as briefly as you can. Okay, so is the agenda clear? We will finish at 6, do or die 6 o'clock, and people will get on to the next event. But I hope that you can stay for the full 2 hours and really have the opportunity to find yourself in a network that is working, has not started its work today, but in fact, over the long years, so that the daunting moment in which we find ourselves is not so daunting after all. So I'll model with brevity. I'm Mary Hunt. I work at WATER, the Women's Alliance for Theology, Ethics, and Ritual. I'm a theologian, writing and lecturing on feminist issues. My theopolitical involvement is mostly in Catholic feminism and LGBTIQ groups. So, Nami?
Hi, my name is Nami Kim. I teach at Spelman College, historically Black Women's College. Writing, teaching, and working with some organizations in Korea is what I'm doing in relation to intersectionality.
I'm Judith Flasco. I'm retired from Manhattan College, and you'll hear in a few minutes what intersectional work is that I'm doing.
I'm Elizabeth Trusler-Fiorenza, and I teach at Harvard University and Greenwich School, and I'm involved in the two magazines.
I'm Andy Smith. I teach at UC Riverside. I'm involved in a number of organizing enterprises, most particularly the 18-year plan to end voter oppression.
Can I just stop for, if everybody just moved their chair in like a couple of inches, we could be a little bit closer together. I think it would help with hearing. Can you do that? And then when you speak, please speak loudly. And if you're outside the circle, please come into the circle. Joe and others are welcome to come into the circle. Rosalind, Fred, and have you. Please come into the circle so that we're all together. There's a chair there. There's a chair there, Rosalind. Welcome. Rick Fortune, you want to go next? We're introducing ourselves.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest we stand so we can see.
Good idea.
Because I can't see you guys. So, I'm Marie Fortune. I'm the founder and senior analyst at Faith Trust Institute. I'm a pastor in the United Church of Christ. I now live in a very red county of a very red state in East Tennessee. And that's where I live. My what did you call it?
Intersectional work. Just getting up in the morning, right?
And it's quite an interesting experience.
My name is Jules Martinez. I am from Puerto Rico. I'm a systematic theologian working at the intersection of Latin American and U.S. Latino theologies and learning how to incorporate the voices of my Latino sisters dogmatically and constructively in the communities that I serve.
I'm Julian Gonzalez. I'm a student at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. I'm involved in discussions about gender, race, and politics as a mosaic scholar and also as the co-president of Trinity Society of Women.
My name is Elaine Wainwright, and I come from Sydney in Australia. At the moment, I'm not in an academic position, but I'm working full-time in the religious congregation I belong to. And the intersectionality in which I find myself engaged in is feminist, post-colonial, ecological. And one of the areas of advocacy that, or the area of advocacy that we're trying to open up is political advocacy and trying to find ways to do that in our context at the moment.
Kathleen Rushton from Christchurch, Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm Sister of Mercy. I'm a biblical, work in biblical studies. My area of interest is ecological, but leaning more and more to the importance of economic, my work in consciousness raising is with a group of Eco Action, which is an ecumenical group working with inner city parishes in our city, trying to get people involved and aware of political processes.
Thank you.
I'm Veronica Lawson from Ballarat, Australia, and I don't belong to any academic institution at the moment. I'm a Sister of Mercy, and my involvement is in eco-feminist hermeneutics and receptive interfaith dialogue.
My name is Gabriela Viesca Chavez. I am Mexican. Yeah. And full Mexican. But I'm currently serving as women's pastor in a predominantly white, upper-class evangelical American church. And so it is a very interesting scenario. I'm women's pastor to both the English-speaking congregation and Spanish-speaking congregation, and I serve as the only bridge in the church. So I kind of do borderlands theology every day, facing with lots of oppression, but seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
I'm Rosalind Hinton, and I'm go between San Francisco and Louisiana. Louisiana and New Orleans is my home, and I've recently started a website, Louisiana Out Loud, to try to get some more voices in sexual and reproductive health out and into the community.
Hi, I'm Kelly Stewart. I'm a student at Vanderbilt, study theology. Most recently, before I was in school, I was working with domestic violence perpetrators, and the work that I do now looks at feminist and queer theory and Catholic theology, especially at issues around violence against women.
My name is Emily Cohen, and I am an MDiv student at Harvard Divinity School, and more importantly, was a former water intern, and also have worked with Faith Trust Institute. And I study Buddhism and gender.
I'm Wendy Millette. I'm a second year at theology at Yale University, and I worked at Water formerly, and I'm interested in studying feminist theology alongside conversations with sin and trauma.
I'm Elaine Nogueira Guadzi. I'm originally from Brazil, but I have lived for the past 18 years in South Africa. I worked with refugees from Angola, Mozambique, and working with the intersection of ecology, liberation theology, and race, and everything else that goes on in the post-colonial context. But right now I'm turning a new page in my life. I just immigrated to the United States 2 days ago, and I'm starting me and my children, and my husband. So it's a very interesting new, it's a new phase where I'm going to be working with Yvonne in the Methodist school, Theological School in Ohio, and work with theology, ecology, and race. And so I'm not sure yet what is going to be my political involvement in the United States, but I'm looking forward to see it. Also, I would like just to leave some slides about the conference, the International Society for Religion, Nature, and Culture, which we're going to have next year in New York. And I have been working very hard to bring feminist and gender critique to those ecologians, the ecologists. So, yeah. Anyone interested, please just get the flights with me later.
Thank you, and a special welcome. We need you.
Diane New with WATER, the Women's Alliance for Theology, Ethics, and Ritual. My focus is the ritual and spirituality, and we bring politics to all of this, and it's getting focused on, I hate to say it, abuse and what it means for all of us as women together. So it's so great to have you here, see your faces, and let's keep hanging together is what I think we need to do. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Hero Park, and I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry of the United Methodist Church. And I work with women and racial ethnic people. And right now, I'm writing about liberal theology and religious radicals, who practice theology in a ministry context. So I involve in church and society issues and work with the Feminist FSR, and we involve in social issues around the church and society.
My name is Sarah Jobe. I'm a doctoral student at Duke in Theology and Hebrew Bible, but I'm also a prison chaplain, and so most of my intersectional work is around things that affect women's incarceration, and most of my action-oriented work these days is around access to post-secondary ed, starting inside of women's prisons and making pathways to post-release.
I'm Yvonne Zimmerman, and I teach at the Methodist Theological School in Ohio, and I work on the movement to end human trafficking, which is political and intersectional all the way down, looking at gender, race, class, sexuality.
Hi, my name is Christine Hay. I'm an Episcopal/Anglican priest, but the priesthood does not give me money, so I teach at Denison University, feminist ethics and Christian social ethics and religious ethics. My research and teaching areas include militarism, military prostitution, transnational feminist ethics. So those areas bring intersectionality of race, gender, class, money, power, and sex, and everything. And I'm also a proud member of Pacific Asian and North Asian American Women in Theology and Ministry, known as PANADA, and so is NAMI. Currently, I'm organizing a conference at Yvonne's School and Methodist School of Theology, Methodist Theological School in Ohio. So if you know anyone, any Asian, Pacific Asian and North Asian American women in theology and ministry, please let me know, and I'm willing to reach out to those Asian and North Asian American women.
I'm Carol Adams. I'm a writer and activist who lives in Dallas. My intersectional work is around gender, species, and race. I did a book called The Sexual Politics of Meat, and I've also edited 2 anthologies on ecofeminism, and with Marie, an anthology 20 years ago, trying to get the seminaries to deal with sexual and domestic violence, and the book, unfortunately, is still as relevant as that.
I'm Elisabeth Edley from Switzerland. I worked as pastor in the hospitals and homes for students who came at the time.
I'm Gabriele Ferrazzini from Switzerland. I came here with Elizabeth. We met on feminist occasions in our churches, which are one Catholic and the other one Protestant. And I am also a friend of Mary Hunt and Diane's. I hope so. Lots of things always overcome.
Great. I'm Renate Rose, a retired pastor and teacher of the United Church of Christ, and at the moment I'm very much involved in the peace movement. I'm working for the abolition of nuclear weapons and to get the churches to be more outspoken about that.
I just did a water teleconference you can access on our website that deals with those issues, very important.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Jennifer. Sorry for coming in late. Jennifer Reisinger, I teach at San Jose State University in issues of women and religion and American religious history. And I'm a co-editor with Linda Garafoldi of the forthcoming Mary Daly Reader, which will be out in January. And I also do a lot of work around environmentalism and anti-racist work.
I'm Chris Faust. I'm here because it's fun. I do whatever I can. I come up with ideas and I do whatever I can.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
I'm Beverly Dale. I teach the sexuality courses at Lancaster Theological Seminary. I'm Disciples of Christ pastor. And I have started a nonprofit called the Incarnation Institute for Sex and Faith. And we teach an inclusive, science-friendly, sex-positive Christianity. So right now I'm developing some training, and I'm getting sexologists and theologians in the same room to teach one another their disciplines and trying to make an impact on the erotophobia in the culture. I'm also doing some writing, which is kind of hot, and I think I need an agent. So if anybody's got some ideas on that, I'm doing my sexual spiritual memoirs ready for an agent. So it'll guarantee I never get another church position, but that's just
Andrea Tucker. I'm finishing at Vanderbilt in ethics, but living and working in Colorado Springs, teaching there right down the street from focusing on the family, and working and writing on transgender politics at the same time.
Thistlewaite. I'm professor of theology and former president, Chicago Theological Seminary. I'm an activist on issues of ending violence against women and war. And my current political work is trying to deepen and complexify the way we make policy in relationship to which bodies are delivered to violence in which ways, and which mechanisms deliver certain bodies to certain kinds of violence, because we cannot make policy that is a one-size-fits-all approach, because it doesn't work. Thanks, Susan.
My name is Debbie Blades, and I work with women who are escaping spiritual and religious abuse from the alt-right and conservative evangelical communities. I'm Shannon Clarkson, retired, but working with my church. We have a prison ministry that's pretty active. We get interns from the Divinity School at Yale who help to work with us. And also, lately we've been going and demonstrating about the covenant issue.
I'm Cara Lending, and I especially appreciate the inspiration for feminist work from Warda. I'm a friend of Warda's, but I'm very active in local government on multi-faith issues, and also across Australia in the Jewish Christian Muslim Association.
My name is Teresa Ugar. I'm teaching at Cal State University, Los Angeles. It's been a hard time for us at our school, but I see my work as empowering individuals on the margins. And the scholarship I'm doing right now is thinking about Sir Juana Inés de la Cruz and border crossing, and how she can be a model for us in terms of trying to think about immigration reform.
I'm Kathy McCallie. I teach at Phillips Theological Seminary, and I'm a UCC pastor, LGBTQ activist. My work right now is mostly in community organizing and teaching political theory and ethics.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Ersick. I'm a professor of religious studies in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm also co-chair of the Women's Caucus here at the American Academy of Religion. Recently, I was appointed to the board of the Parliament of World Religions, and I've just been designated to be the programming director for women's programming at the next Parliament. The Parliament has an exhibition booth downstairs, and on Sunday we are doing a co-sponsored Women's Caucus with Parliament conversation Sunday at 11:45 for 1 hour in the Women's Lounge, which you can find easily. It's right above registration. We would really like input, and we're looking to have academic conversation on what is happening with women and their religious institutions, as well as spiritual. When I talk about intersectionality, I think that's where the work is for me personally, to work at the conversations that drop out of the conversation when we move into everything.
Hi, my name is Julia Berger. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Kent in Canterbury, UK. I'm based in New York City, where I study religious and faith-based organizations at the United Nations, including their involvement in the gender equality discourse. I am Stephanie O'Rill. I'm a fellow with Boston University and the University-based Institute for Advanced Studies, where I do work on human dignity. My most illustrative point of intersectionality, I just taught a course at St. Catherine of Siena College in London. It's outreach for women of the Global South. My students actually on women, religion, and violence, talking about how we help them utilize policy and make it relevant at the community level.
My name is Emily Leah Silverman. I'm so impressed with everyone here. And so I'm the past president of the American Academy of Religion Western Region. And we had a conference a couple of years ago on subjugated voices, retrieving subjugated voices of the marginalized, colonized, displaced. So that actually is becoming a book that I'm co-editing with Suat Ali, a Sudanese feminist. I was the organizer and editor of Rosemary Ratchet Luther's Restaurant, and my own personal book I'm now getting invited around the country to talk about, which is on spiritual resistance, religious mission and spiritual resistance in a time of genocide or the Holocaust.
Let me just remind those who came in, you're more than welcome. We're introducing ourselves ever so briefly with our name, something about our location, and some struggle in which we're involved. So boom, boom, boom. Okay, so we can finish up and move to our speakers.
Me, Starkey. I am from Minnesota, which has the distinction of having the largest voter turnout in the United States. And we're close to Canada, so that's not by accident. I'm chair of the theology department and also director of women and gender studies, and also on the board of directors for Faith Plus Institute. And my current work is really around spiritual homelessness for survivors of violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, and child abuse.
Sarah Butler, I'm with Faith Trust Institute.
Hey, I'm Katie Zay, former water intern. I live in Cary, North Carolina. Independent consultant working on advocacy strategy, particularly for faith-based organizations. And I'm the board chair for the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, looking at intersectionality, around reproductive justice and all that entails.
You're going to be busy, Katie.
My name is Lee Wan-Yang, coming from Nant's College, University of Toronto in Canada, originally from South Korea for 20 years ago. And I was more involved as a psycho-spiritual therapist rather than theologian, but I came back as a doctoral student a number of years ago. I'm at the final stage of my writing dissertation around the two kinds of oppressive situation of a Korean, particularly Korean nation, North American woman, including patriarchal person, and then what I forgot. Colonial person. So my thesis work is around constructing a theological foundation for intercultural model from the perspective of post-colonial and eco-feminist and intercultural perspective.
Hi, my name is Jan Haas. I'm a PhD candidate at Claremont Graduate University, where I am the coordinator for the Patrick Committee, which is a feminist committee. We bring in a speaker every year. I do a lot of interreligious work, Buddhist Catholic, which will be part of my dissertation when I get to writing the proposal, which I'm not quite sure what I'm doing yet. And then also I teach Bible study at my parish because I know that we need women's presence no matter what, still within the church.
I'm Neil Elliott. I'm one of the acquiring editors at Fortress Press, where we are trying to deepen a new initiative in publishing around the kind of intersectionalities we're talking about here. I'm also an Episcopal priest in Minnesota, and I've spent a lot of the last 2 weeks with other clergy trying to get beyond the idea that the pastoral responsibility is simply to represent all the people all the time, which is not getting us anywhere.
Hi everybody, I'm Jonathan Tadamas. I'm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Currently I'm a transitioning postdoc fellow at UCT working on Gender Bible Publics project. I'm also going to be joining the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Pietermaritzburg in the position of a New Testament post. So I work at the intersection of New Testament biblical studies and gender studies.
My name is Carlos Alejandra, which is a name that I adopted as a non-binary person, non-binary gender person. I was born in Colombia. I studied theology at a Baptist seminary, and I did my master and PhD degree in Brazil. I am working at 3 universities I read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's story, The Most Handsomest Drummer in the World, and I'm reading this story as a non-Christological narrative with the help of post-colonialism and Elizabeth Schroeder-Ferreira's Musa Dubik, Coquelin, and Rieger work. Yeah, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Renate Loh is professor for Feminist Theology in Germany, and I'm at the moment editing a book on intersectionality, which came out of a conference we had last year.
I'm Karen Hessel. Some of you remember me when I was a radical ecumenical troublemaker at the National Council of Churches doing justice for women. I'm retired, living in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, near Portland. One of my intersectionalities has to do with getting to know millennials and understanding race, gender, and class in a whole new way. And I'm here because I'm involved with the Spiritual Alliance to Stop Infant Violence, and one of our initiatives is engaging activist scholars in infusing theological education with various aspects of the concerns we have around domestic and sexual violence and elder abuse.
I'm Colleen Hartung, and I am the coordinator and developer for Ministry to Families and Children at Holy Wisdom Monastery, which is an ecumenical monastery in Madison, Wisconsin. We are developing a faith formation program around Lexio Divina, which has been interesting and rewarding. And I was full-time organizer for the campaign, and I'm a little shell-shocked.
I'm Joe Duggan. I'm the founder of Postcolonial Networks and Waterless Press, also the founder and series editor of Calvary's Postcolonialism and Religion series, and just published a book on knowledge activism. And Dr. Bocan is one of our future authors of Waterless Press.
I'm Jane Frederickson with Faith Trust Institute, and we work in empowering faith communities around domestic and sexual violence, and there are a few colleagues of mine who you've already heard from. So we're a group.
Fulata Moyo, I work with World Council of Churches in Geneva, trying to bring, I don't know what, but I'm also a member of the Second Consensus and Theologians.
Rita, Carol?
I'm Carol Chris, and I live in Greece. I'm a member of the Greenberg Greece. I've run for almost international mutual elections over the last several years, and I'm the first author on a complaint to the European community for failure to enforce environmental laws in Greece, and we were put on infringement status since we won our case, but so far it hasn't been resolved as usual. And I also just have a book coming out through Glasgow called Goddess of God in the World. And I lead Goddess pilgrimages to Crete in the spring and fall, which provide a vision of a society that honored women, respected nature, and had no limits.
I'm Rita Nakashima Brock. I'm 1/8 Taino Indian, 3/8 Spanish, and 4/8 Japanese, and I'm an irregular immigrant. It's a long story. And my current gig is directing the Center for Solar Center at Bright Divinity School, which does public education and research on moral injury. And our first focus was veterans of war, but we are now, I'm in conversation with an enormous nonprofit to take the word national as a dimension of responses to trauma, beginning with Los Angeles County, which is bigger than 42 states. So it's my next phase of life.
Thanks, Rita. We have one more person, and then we'll move to our...
Okay, I'm a student. I'm an international student from the Philippines, currently studying at Princeton Theological Seminary.
And your name is?
Alicia. And so I'm just here to learn how we bridge activism and theology. And we haven't really done theology in our country, so I'm just here to learn.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I know it takes a long time, but isn't it worth it to hear who's doing what? I think it's really remarkably important. Elizabeth Schutz, if you're into introduce our speakers and take us to the next step, please.
Okay. Before I introduce the speakers, I want to apologize that I will need to disappear quickly before the end, because the Feminist Studies in Religion forum is meeting at 6 o'clock, and so I have to go to another building, and after the experience this is mine. Okay, I want also to announce that FSR has a conference in June, from June 18 to 21 at Drew University, and the topic of the conference is Making Alliances, Breaking Taboos, Transforming Religion. So I want to invite you if you are interested. Finally, I want to invite you for the reception tonight of FSR. It's in, can anybody help me out?
The Marriott River Center.
Thank you.
At 8:30.
Right, thank you. And you're all welcome. Okay, now I'm doing my duty. Our first speaker is Nami Kim, who is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Spelman College, which is a historically black women's college located in Atlanta. She is the author of The Gender Politics of the Korean Protestant Right, Hegemonic Masculinity. And as far as I know, it's already on the internet and will appear next week in print.
Yeah, it's out there.
Hopefully. Her co-edited volume is with Bongi and Joel, Critical Theology Against U.S. Militarism in Asia, which is coming from Palgrave, and you want to watch out for that. Nami serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Feminist Studies in Religion. She is the co-chair of the FSR Forum Committee, and she is serving on the Journal of Race, Ethnicity, and Religion. Her topic is our survival, not at the expense of somebody else's, forging an intersectional coalition. Our second speaker is my friend Judith Plasko. She is Professor Emerita of Religious Studies at Manhattan College. Her scholarly interests focus on contemporary religious thought with a specialization in feminist theology. Judith has lectures widely on feminist theology in the States and Europe and across the world. She co-founded the Journal of Feminist Studies in Religion and co-edited it for the first 10 years. She is still senior co-founding editor of the journal. She is past president of the American Academy of Religion, and Judith is the author of the first Jewish feminist theology, which you probably all know, Standing Again at Sinai. And her latest book, as we already heard, is co-authored with Carol Christ, who is here, and it's entitled Goddess and God in the World, Conversations in Embodied Theology. And it will be discussed here at the meeting, and I hope you all will be there if you find the place. Okay. And the title is I Am Here as a Jewish Feminist. That's a great simple title. Looking forward to it. Last but not least is Andrea Lee Smith. She is an American feminist. Why do I say that? Okay, I looked at the internet. I'm sorry. She is a feminist activist and against violence and a theologian. Smith's work focuses on issues of violence against women of color in their communities, specifically Native American women. She is a co-founder of INSIGHT, Women of Color Against Violence, the Boarding School Healing Project, and the Chicago chapter of Women of All Red Nations. Andrea has based her activism and her scholarship on the lives of women of color and long claimed to be Cherokee. Formerly an assistant professor of American culture and women's studies at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Smith is an associate professor in the Department of Media and Cultural Studies at the University of California, Riverside. Her topic is Beyond Ethnographic Engagement, Changing the Terms of the Debate. Looking forward to all of your presentation.
I think so everybody can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll try my best to speak up. Let me start by briefly sharing my historical location. While being aware of the limits of categorization, I can say that my historical location is a third-generation feminist liberation theologian, rooted in intersectional, transnational, decolonial, and de-imperial feminist commitment that takes identity seriously, but that does not base it on identity politics. As a US-based woman of color academic, but with no US citizenship, I maintain transnational connections with the organizations and the people in the place where I came from. As a colleague of mine has reminded, for women of color, writing is a political act. I would say that political action for me in this historical and political juncture includes transgressive teaching and the production of oppositional knowledges that are not in the service of imperial project. My transnational connections and the critique of the interlocking structures of oppression have prompted me to work on two recent book projects. One is a collaborative project with activist scholar teachers of Asian descent. It is called Critical Theology Against U.S. Imperialist Militarism in Asia. Taking our collaborative writing as a political act, in this book, we talk about the relationship between Christianity and U.S. imperialist militarism in Asia on multi-level. If feminist scholar teachers fail to critique U.S. military hegemony, feminist work can be easily appropriated and used for the service of the imperial project. In our book, we argue that the work of decolonization in the former colonies should proceed together with the work of de-imperialization in the imperial center, because imperialization has taken place both in the imperial center and in the colonies through state-sanctioned violence. Another U.S. presidential election just took place last week. Before the election, feminist scholar Zilla Eisenstein said, quote, "The 2016 American presidential race was the election from hell, between a misogynist, racist bigot and an imperial feminist," unquote. In the electoral college vote, the misogynist, racist bigot won, whereas in the popular vote, an imperial feminist won. Yes, with the election of white supremacist, fascist, misogynist, whose slogan was to make America great again, the fear of what is to come is real among women and men of color, immigrants, Muslims, sexual minorities, gender non-conforming people, and some women, not because racism, white supremacy, sexism, and Islamophobia are newly born, but because the intensity, level, or degree of violence will worsen in every aspect of marginalized people's lives. One of the many things that are disappointing, concerning, yet not so surprising about this election includes the fact that 78% to 81% of white born-again evangelical Christians, however you name them, voted for Trump. Also, although there's no exact number for born-again evangelical Christians who are racial and ethnic minorities, what I have been hearing anecdotally since last week's election is that quite a good number of middle-class, college-educated, Korean and Chinese American evangelical Christians also voted for Trump. And one of the main reasons for voting for him had to do with their opposition to same-sex marriage and abortion. Religious conservatives, including religious right, and what German theologian Dorothy Jellett once called Christofascism, have different manifestations in different contexts. And part of this transnational phenomenon is what I have worked in my other book entitled The Gendered Politics of the Korean Protestant Right, which examines the Protestant right that has maintained transnational connections with other Christian right movements, including the U.S. Christian right. By forming a movement in advancing its conservative geopolitical and social agendas in Korea, as well as among immigrant Korean communities in North America, the Protestant right has supported right-wing political leaders in Korea, including the current corrupt authoritarian president, who is female. In my feminist intersectional analysis of the Protestant right's gendered politics, which uses Elizabeth's notion of hierarchy as a heuristic tool, I examine three seemingly unrelated phenomena: father's school, which is similar to the Promise Keepers, anti-LGBT movement, and Islamophobia. An intersectional analysis of the Protestant right allows us not only to explain how sexism, homophobia, and Islamophobia are interconnected, but also show that these three phenomena are addressing a common issue, that is contested hegemonic masculinity in relation to others, such as women, sexual minorities, and racial, ethnic, religious minorities. Connecting the dots among these three phenomena is what I try to do in my book. When I presented a chapter draft on the Protestant right's anti-LGBT movement several years ago in Korea, while I was teaching there, an organization that invited me to speak received a threat call to cancel my talk. If not, the caller said that he could not guarantee my safety. The Protestant right has been quite violent in their attempt to silence opposing voices and actions, and continues to do so. An analysis of U.S. military imperialism in Asia and the Korean Protestant right is ultimately an argument for and vision of coalition building that does not replicate anti-intersectionality as a tool of survival. Back in 2007, criticizing U.S. imperial feminism, Zilla Eisenstein asked, how to think about feminism in 2007 and beyond? I think this question is still relevant today, especially in the face of escalation of the very real threat of various forms of violence against marginalized and minoritized people in the U.S. and abroad. If feminism does not want to lose its relevance and significance as an inclusive social, political, religious movement and theoretical framework oriented toward justice and for all marginalized persons. Feminist liberation theological intersectional analysis is more needed than ever, along with intersectional coalition, as we continue the work that we have been doing as educators, activists, religious leaders, by speaking the truth to power, working for justice and equality for all. Much work is ahead of us, and I look forward to further discussion with all of you. Thank you.
When I retired a few years ago, it was clear to me that I wanted activism to be an important part of how I spent my time. After Eric Garner was murdered for selling loose cigarettes in the summer of 2014, I was trying to figure out how to plug into anti-racism work, and I decided to get involved with the campaign for police accountability of Jews for racial and economic justice. JFREJ, as it's called, is a 25-year-old social justice organization in New York City that works in coalition with other groups on a variety of issues. A central principle of JFREJ organizing is that those most affected by particular issues should take the lead in formulating priorities. So JFREJ is part of Communities United for Police Reform in New York that includes many organizations of people of color and works in coordination with them. I wanted to do anti-racism work in a Jewish context for a couple of reasons. First, because my commitment to social justice grows out of my Judaism. And second, because whatever connection Jews had to the struggle for racial justice during the civil rights movement has gotten frayed over the last many years. And it's important to say and to live out the idea that social justice is central to Jewish identity. I would add to that more recently the Trump campaign has made very clear the connections between racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism, with the appointment of a major anti-Semite as his chief strategist. And it's really important to turn up as Jews against the rising tide of racism and xenophobia. So my original intention for today was to talk about an action I was involved in disrupting a Trump speech at a Republican fundraiser last year. But to tell you the truth, it kind of feels beside the point. So I will focus on two other JFREJ actions or campaigns. The center of JFREJ's police accountability work is the passage of the Right to Know Act by the New York City Council. One part of the act would require police to identify themselves when they stop someone and give each person a card with the phone number of the Civilian Complaint Review Board on it. And then the second part of the act would require police to tell people why they're being stopped. This summer, JFREJ held 4 very successful Jews for Black Lives demonstrations in different boroughs of New York City, centering on the demand for passage of the Right to Know Act. The demonstrations were led by the Jews of Color Caucus within JFREJ, so the demonstrations really lifted up the need for anti-racism work both within the Jewish community as well as the larger society. The day before our third demonstration, the Movement for Black Lives published its platform, one paragraph of which referred to Israeli treatment of Palestinians as genocide. A lot of mainstream Jewish organizations, who obviously hadn't read the platform, freaked out and began issuing statements. I was very struck at the time by how important and powerful it was to be reading the platform in the context of active involvement in anti-racist work versus sitting in my apartment or just having abstract conversations with friends. Then this September, I was one of 6 JFREJ seniors who had the opportunity to attend a We Won't Wait summit in Washington, D.C. We Won't Wait is a collaborative that prioritizes women's economic agenda and that involves a wide range of organizations, including the Domestic Workers Alliance, Make It Work, Caring Across Generations, Moms Rising, Black Women's Roundtable, Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, and others. The summit brought together over 1,000 women seeking to advance a public policy agenda that would put women of color and low-income women at the center. JFREJ was involved because we're part of Caring Across Generations, because one of our big campaigns has involved building alliances between domestic workers and employers. I've read and talked a lot about intersectionality over the last many years, and the concept is central to Jay Fridge's work, but I've never seen it more powerfully enacted than at this summit. At one point, hundreds of women from the Domestic Workers Alliance marched into the dining room in bright red t-shirts shouting, "We won't wait." And it just made very vivid the exciting potential of a movement led by low-income women of color, many of them immigrants. The summit included session after terrific session on voting rights, economic security, reproductive justice, violence against women, ensuring that all families are valued, and many other issues. Every single session stressed the connections between economic inequality, racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism. And the organizers clearly tried to ensure that no group was left behind. Queer, trans, and disabled women, for example, were part of panels addressing many different topics. So it was quite amazing to be part of that collaboration. On Wednesday morning after the election, I found this message from Jay Fridge in my inbox. "We write to you this morning in grief and rage, in mourning and in action. For you who feel alone, want to give up, are under direct attack, whose beloveds are under direct attack, feel enraged, don't know where to turn or what to do. For all members of our community, now more than ever, our work together matters. Our work didn't begin and won't end at the ballot box. We aren't going anywhere. In the hours, weeks, and months ahead, we need to double down on our efforts, stand with our partners at the front lines, and those in our communities most directly under attack. We're grateful for our movements and our communities, and in this difficult moment, we will show up for each other in ways we never have before. Join us." The message made me very grateful to be part of a Jewish group that's working together with many others.
So in terms of intersectionality, I think it's a term that everybody uses, but nobody means the same thing. So I often tend to hear it meaning more around kind of a multicultural representation. Like, let's make sure women of color or other marginalized people get represented. And often the logic is, if the people in power just knew us better, they'd like us and include us. And what doesn't kind of really get dissected there is that part of the logics of racialization is to make the racialized subject infinitely knowable, right? So the imperative to always make ourselves known is itself part of racialization, right? It is the Western subject that can know, that can theorize. It's the racialized subject that can be theorized about, that everybody can know about. So instead, I tend to think of it more around the intersectional logics of oppression, and how do they structure the life for everybody on planet Earth, such that we all need to be equally invested in dismantling these logics. So I just thought I'd give kind of a case example of how I see this in practice, how we would think about this in practice. So we could talk about including Native peoples in the academy, like how can we include Native and Indigenous voices? Or we can start to look at the logics of settler colonialism themselves. So for instance, if we look at the Johnson versus McIntosh decision, this is kind of the legal decision that basically is the legal basis for how the U.S. justifies title to indigenous land. And the rationale for that decision is essentially that because Native peoples do not work, they do not deserve title to land. So essentially then, what makes you human is the ability to work. Because Native peoples cannot work, they cannot truly be human and hence cannot own land. It is thus not a coincidence that Native peoples are also legally often defined as having a legal status as being under disability, because people with disabilities are also legally defined as those who cannot work. So for instance, in the Goodwill decision, when people with disabilities tried to unionize, that was not acceptable because they did not qualify as workers. So they do not deserve worker protections because what people with disabilities do does not count as work. So if we look at academic education, what is the point of school? The school is to make you a worker. Hence, if you never can ontologically count as a worker, school is not for you. So it is not, therefore, an accident that there's such an astronomical suspension and expulsion rate for Native students with disabilities. For instance, in Riverside, where I'm at, the suspension rate for Native students with disabilities is 100%. So this, of course, intersects with capitalism, right? How do we know we're valuable? We're valuable insofar as we can produce for the capitalist system. This, of course, then has gender implications, and not just in the larger capitalist system, but for how we organize, right? We value our organizing work if we are a hard worker, right? If you are working 24 hours a day to fight the power, you are a good activist. If you want to take a power nap, you are a bad activist. Thus, this has gender implications because what do we consider to be the work? It's if we go to a protest, we fight the power, we do a petition drive. We don't consider the cooking part of the organizing work. We don't consider the daycare part of the organizing work. That's the thing you do on your own time that doesn't count. So of course, people who have to do this don't have time to do all this and go fight the power, right? We think of an organizing as an add-on to our life, right? The life itself isn't the work, rather than thinking about how do we redo life so that life is the organizing itself. This thus comes full circle to the academic industrial complex because this is how we've internalized our education. We think of teaching intersectionality, but the way we do the work is itself based on the same logic. Who is the good student? It's the good student that works hard, right? The lazy student is the bad student. But this is all premised on the idea that students don't have bodies, right? That it's not really uncomfortable to sit in a lecture for 8 hours a day in these uncomfortable chairs. You don't get to eat because there's only a 5-minute break. And you really don't want to study all night because you're tired and sleep deprived, right? If you put your we thought about it as the lazy student is the one who puts the body back into the learning. But it says, I really would rather sleep tonight. Maybe I'll be slightly less miserable. What if we thought of that as the good student, right? What if we did learning so it was not around academic productivity? Because essentially what we're doing is we're training students to say, be miserable in school so you'll accept being miserable at your job. So, if we thus did this, right, if we started to look at the logics of settler colonialism, we start to see, hey, we are all implicated, right? It's not just about including Native peoples, which is important, but it's about changing a system that actually screws all of us over, right? We are all fundamentally shaped by these logics of settler colonialism because they intersect and cannot be read outside the logics of disability, capitalism, patriarchy, etc. I think the implications then is our organizing work changes. It's not just about protesting, which is important, or inclusion, but it's about saying we all need to dismantle this and we need to take over, right? This can seem hard when Trump just started the apocalypse, but I say, it's easy to be in reactive mode and instead say, step back. What if we were in this to win, right? What if we didn't just not like Trump, but we had a thing to replace Trump with? This, however, is going to take some effort, right? It's going to require building infrastructure, building the thing that we actually like. But back to the academic industrial complex, I'm sure if I said, everybody go complain about sexism and racism in the academy, go, right? You could do it forever. But how much of our time is spent building the education system we actually want, right? We ask for inclusion in the academy, but not building the education that would actually be liberatory. Let's take water as an example. What if water was the center of education and the academy was just a little add-on on the weekend?
Sometimes it feels like
For everyone, does that make sense? The first when you thought of feminist theological education, the first thing you thought of was water, right? Like what if we recentered what we thought these projects were? So that's been my focus on organizing work for groups like Insight, etc. It's about let's create the world we actually want to live in now. Let's create different structures of governance. Let's create different structures of accountability. Let's create different kinds of systems of education. This isn't easy, it's trial and error, but that's okay. We don't have to actually know the answer. Like it's going to take a while to build that. But I think instead of when we try to build this, I think people are more likely to join because they say, hey, I see what you're doing here, right? Now when you ask people to join the revolution, they say, well, I still get to keep my iPod. Because all they can think of is what I'm going to lose don't have a vision of what they would be getting. But if we start to live the revolution now, rather than wait for the infinitely deferred revolution, people say, oh, this is the glimpse of that now. I can live it now. I can't wait to join this. Looks like lots of fun. That's it.
I'm going to thank the speakers for very challenging, I would say, not only informative but very challenging presentations. And also like to thank Elizabeth for sharing this part of the meeting. And I think Andy Smith has told us what to do, which is to take our time now for 15 minutes, which is what 15-20 minutes is what we do in this group. And let's create it. Let's think not about, poor, pitiful me living under this new administration, but what are the things that we're going to do, that we are doing, that are constructive, that are creative, and that are feasible, that will make a difference. So let's take some time to brainstorm that with each other in groups of, I would say, no more than 5. Feel free to move your chairs around, find some people you want to talk to, and let's create some aspects of the revolution to which Andy has this is a hard conversation for many people to have because there are so many things that need doing. And I think all 3 of our speakers, and I want to thank them again, Nami and Judith and Andy, for presenting us with some very concrete things that they see, both in terms of the kind of analysis that needs to be done, writing as a revolutionary activity, writing as an act of resistance, working within a particular religious tradition, in Judith's case, on very, very important and I think moving matters, and certainly, as Andy has made clear to us, doing very concrete things that will help us to think about these things in a new way. And as I look around this room, and as I know so many of you, I think I can't imagine a room full of smarter, more committed, more experienced, more diverse people if I imagine them. I can't even imagine what this room would look like, because these are, we are, look right around, just look around. We are the people who have some of the solutions to some of these problems, and we are accompanied by lots of people around us in our various settings who are also part of what can make a difference in this. So I think number 1 to take away from this is that it is not a time to have downward mobility of expectations or of emotions, but a time to really understand that we have experience and that we have resources to deal with what we face. And that the clarity with which we now have to face it can't be denied. And those things are very helpful. So I'd like to open the floor to hear from people in your groups. What were some of the concrete things that came out, some of the new thinking, some of the new ways of approaching some of the problems that we face that were brought to us by our speakers? We'd like to hear from those. Not every group has to speak, but please feel free and just identify maybe who was in your group and one or 2 very salient things that you came up with. Floor's open. Yeah, Katie Zay.
So, hi, I'm Katie Zay from North Carolina, and the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice has started a program named Blessing Abortion Clinics. So, there's one that's going to be happening actually in Washington, D.C., about 2 weeks before the inauguration at the new Planned Parenthood Metro Washington Clinic. And it's something that we've been very careful about designing, understanding the risk for clergy who choose to do that, being very intentional. But we're looking at other places where that might be something that's helpful and productive. So Washington, D.C. in January.
How about the Women's March in Washington? Does anybody know much about that yet? Is there any clarity on that?
12 to 5.
I'm sorry?
Things going on from 12 to 5.
On the 21st of January. Does everybody know that there's a Women's March in January, the 21st, the day after the inauguration? Yes, please.
And watch, the stuff on Facebook or wherever you're getting your information from, because I talked to someone associated with the DNC, and they don't have permitting yet. And so they may or may not get permitting because it's a very strict thing around the inauguration. So people should watch.
Yeah. Judith?
We were talking about this morning at the RCRC consultation, and the point was made that, first of all, a lot a very dangerous time for women of color and for immigrants, to come to Washington for a march. And it may be that it really isn't the smartest thing to do at that moment.
Yeah, that's why I raised it, because we're trying to get more intelligence about it. Yeah, go ahead.
I've heard people say in response to what causes the problem in Washington, to shift the focus to being regional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
there's different
Lori
states.
and then Carol.
I think Los Angeles is planning Maryland.
Yeah, there are a lot of them planning. Carol?
I think you can check a Facebook like Women's March on Texas, Women's March on, so that it's gone to the state, like Austin. They're going to do one in Austin.
Portland, Oregon's got one.
Yeah, Rhode Island. Okay, that's the sort of thing that raises the question of what kind of organizing is being done that does have any kind of mass impact. And what we see is not much. And it's really, and because it is difficult, as you say, Judith, that's why I was out of the country when it was announced. I was wondering who announced this and who's doing it. And that's what everybody wants to know. And yet lots of people got their tickets, they're getting their hotels, and they're all set to go. So it's very tricky.
So Mary,
Yeah,
the other thing about doing it at that level is it's accessible to more people who can drive to their state capital or whatever,
Right.
carpool and blah, blah, blah. So if we're talking about, the base, the folks, the rest of us, it's much more doable. So-
Yeah, I mean, I'm not involved in it. I don't know
but
anything about it.
strategically, I would vote for that.
For the regional.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so keep our eyes on that. What
Well,
else? did I do?
Facebook is alive and going crazy, so if you have comments, you should go to the main page and make your comments there, because I think they're reading them.
Other strategies emerging from these groups. What was the tenor of your group? What were people feeling? What were some of the concerns?
We talked about privilege. When do we use it? What's the purpose of it? How do we expose it? I think Jennifer can summarize that better. Jennifer, your 2-point privilege.
Yeah, no, I had just said that you can use privilege as a shield to help others. And I gave an example where I'm always out as a lesbian on my campus, and I had a young Laotian gay man come to me from one of my classes, and he said he just didn't know who else to go to, and he's really, really scared. He'd been bullied a lot in high school for both of those identities, and he just doesn't know what to do, and so we had a very frank talk, and it was helpful, but also that you can, once you're conscious, I think a couple people in our group made this, once you're conscious of privilege, you use what privilege you have to deconstruct privilege. And that's very important going forward, and try not to be defensive. That the normal response when you're not yet conscious about your privilege is to get defensive when you're challenged on it. And so if you make that process clear, I think we can help a lot of people who don't yet know that what they're experiencing or the way they're reacting is a privileged reaction. And I think we need to do that to have honest and frank conversations.
Others? Yes. I'm sorry, Christine.
So I raised this question is how to utilize empathy among us, of course, religious, racial, and class differences. So I just gave an example. As a Korean national, I was really afraid of the result of election because Trump's voting policy is really scary, just putting the entire world into the third war. It's possible. But then after the election, I had a weird connection between my American students and myself, not because of fear, but because of our commitment to fighting against whatever injustice caused by this new regime. In the group, I shared this experience and then started thinking about how to articulate the politics of empathy, and then how to really strategize our empathy, not simply emotional feelings, but beyond emotional feelings, and how to put our empathy into actions and how to exercise it in own classroom.
A feminist liberation theology of empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That's somebody's dissertation.
How about other comments from people? Yes, please.
I'll say the connections we were trying to make, the things that I was thinking about was how to make things that are life-giving, that we think of as self-care, as the things on the side, right? How do we incorporate that into our scholarship, but also into our classrooms, and get students to start to think about themselves not as these future workers, right? But that knowledge production can be life-giving and not just something that sort of drags you down and makes you sort of tired and exhausted, right? As a good scholar, as a good worker. Another thing I will say that I got from you was to think about having students write things anonymously so that they can have their voice heard, not just by you, but by their other students, and then raising some of those voices up as a way to sort of show students that the loudest voice is not the one that is always the most knowledgeable or has the most to say. And that was just a small little thing that meant a lot to me to take back to my classroom.
Great.
But in that group, I just add that decentering the activist, the pushback, the fight idea. As long as we're focusing on the fight, we're focusing on that which we don't want. So back to what our speaker says, what we want is more joy, what we want is more pleasure, what we want is more respect, more love, compassion. That's all good stuff. So why do we go, as if it's a big, we've got the good stuff on our side. That's what needs to be articulated, and one of the things we brought up is how is self-care. How well are we doing that in our own lives, and then teaching it and modeling it and putting it in the educational system itself. That's another whole thing. But as long as we stay adversarial, it's us against the bad guys, then is that not keeping us from the vision? And does that not serve the purpose of the empire?
Okay, Lori, and then somebody down here. Go ahead, Lori.
I'm just really cautious about what you're saying about anger, because I think anger is good. And I think too often we just go right past that. And if we gotta love, we gotta do this. I think we really need to see where a lot of women and men of color are coming from, and we have to be allies for them. And we're all in this journey, this process, and we're all at different spots. So maybe something we can do is to figure out, okay, how do you deal with that, whatever person in your family that voted differently? And maybe focus on not shaming people for voting for a certain person, but on what was the motivation behind that person? Because I think, like, the Bernie voters were very similar to the Trump voters. And so maybe looking at people feeling that they're not making enough money, they don't have a retirement, some of those basic issues I think are really critical for a lot of things.
Or how about the 43% who didn't vote at all?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that'll be at your Thanksgiving table.
Those ones we can shame, right? Is that okay to shame? No, I want to agree. I'm going to still be adversarial against the power structure. The boys in DC that are putting this thing together, incompetent though they may be, they're still putting it together, and I will stand as an adversary to them. I don't feel adversarial to the people in my community and at the grocery store where I shop who voted for Trump. And I do want to find the ways to engage with them in that conversation and understand and have a civil engagement with them, which I think they're open to, some of them. And I think that's where it's worth the energy. But it brings me back to the other thing where I think some of us as progressives may have missed the boat. I doubt that those of us in this room may have, but the importance of the local. And I think politically, the loss of the state legislatures to the Republican parties has been devastating. and again, apart from the partisan part, we were asleep at the wheel. And so I think it's absolutely critical, and it goes back to your point of building the structures that we love and believe in where we are. And I know that most of you are doing that and keep doing that. That's what's really important, that we don't take our eye off of that, the work that we're doing right where we are, in our neighborhoods, in our, you know, and when we're called to go or send the letters or send the money and so forth. But that's behind my concern, that we not go to Washington. But I've been to Washington, okay, but that we show up at the state legislature where they're doing the most damage at this point, and it goes up the ladder. So that's what I take away in terms of reminding myself, let's, you know, do the stuff where we live.
Well, let's go to the other side of that, which is the international piece. This is a room full of people from at least a dozen countries, if not more. And I'm wondering if there are insights or reflections from people who in fact couldn't vote, didn't vote in this election, which we've been focusing on in the main for obvious reasons, but whose lives will be affected by this willy-nilly. And I just wonder if there are any reflections or any wisdom from people that people would like to share, or reactions or senses of things from people who from other parts of the world than the U.S.
I think unfortunately it sets an example to the rest of the world, which for some people they'll take on board. Not all of us. But it says, okay, you know, now it's okay to grab women. It's now okay to reduce climate change, reduce, you know, the issues about climate change. So that's a problem for the rest of the world.
Please, Carol, and then do you want to go first, then Carol? Go ahead.
Well, I originally come from Malawi, and this morning I was woken up with a message from there. The Catholic and the evangelicals are doing a big march in Malawi against abortion and against LGBT rights, and because they are inspired by Trump. So I mean, what has happened here has an impact all over the world, and in most cases, I mean, here you have the joy of you can discuss issues like this. In most parts, they will not even have the chance to discuss. They will just take it to the streets. So.
Yeah, and you remind me too of the situation well, certain Latin American situations where there's this unholy alliance of people opposing abortion and LGBTIQ rights has led to enormous problems. One particular path we won't discuss, but the FARC problem and so forth. And it's very clear that these religious aspects do play their role. Yeah. Carol.
I live in a village in an island in the country that has had a huge influx of refugees over the last year.
Lesbos and Greece.
Greece, I live in Lesbos, basically it's all the Lesbos village, which we would do. And right now the situation is really tragic in Greece because borders are closed, no one in Europe wants refugees, everyone in my village hates refugees. It's been the whole world is going in that direction. And one of the things that really it worries me a lot is that nobody is talking about it anymore. And nobody is talking about, even in the Democratic Party, and really, as someone said, was a liberal hawk. She was not talking about it in the military industrial complex or stopping American intervention. How to do the U.S. was now in Afghanistan, first of all, because of the U.S. is still in Afghanistan. So that's an issue that I really teach, even though there's a lot of domestic issues in our minds, to keep this larger issue of self-share in our minds as well.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. Well, Susanna, and then we'll take one last comment, and that will have to do do it for time, and people are welcome to stay and chat with each other. As the meeting goes on.
I still want to encourage everybody to come together and do public statements. We did this just at Brooklyn School of Theology as individual faculty members and administrators. And we got a lot of resistance to this, and then we published it online, and now I feel personally very encouraged. There's a great need. We get emails from all kinds of clergy members and just lay people who, even from inside the universities, who felt completely silenced, and that the statement helps them to feel company. And so there are not many statements by mainline religious organizations, and so I think there is great room for making our voice heard, and our statement is relatively long. Some of my colleagues criticize it, it's too long, but we wanted to be intersectional and comprehensive, and we can back up basically every word with all the crazy stuff that was said in the last 1.5 years publicly. And I think by us coming together and making these public statements, it's a small attempt. I mean, we also send it to the New York Times, but they will never publish it. But they should really publish these voices as a counterbalance. And so if many of us do this from all kinds of religious backgrounds, this was intentional Christian, was intentionally related to the institution where we teach, but we could come together across the board. It's just a lot of complicated maneuvering. But I want to encourage everybody to go back to their institutional or whatever group they have and make a public statement and put it out online, and then by word of mouth it actually goes around.
Thank you. And our colleague from the Philippines will have the last word.
Okay, actually, in spite of everything that's happening, I see so much.
Stand
Okay, yeah.
so they can see that.
Okay, actually, after the presidential election, they called me up and they said condolence. Okay, but for me, I see so much hope, because it's the same moment like my mother died, same last week. But it's a new beginning, and it will bring out the best, and the world is watching how you would react, and it will be something of a model. So I remember like what Steve Jobs said when I went out and I was down. It was my most creative moment. So this will bring out the most creativity out of all of you, all of us. And it would show the spirit of America that made really America great. I'm sorry, I'm using the term. We are already great. Let's make America great.
I'd like to once again thank our speakers. I would also like to once again remind you that this conversation will continue tomorrow morning in the session A19-105, Educating Boundaries, Intersectionality, and Political Action to the Women's Caucus, which will be at 9 o'clock in the Convention Center at room 221A, which is the second level east. If you had a hard time finding this,
It's actually quite easy. If you've been in registration, follow an escalator. We're like right over the registration.
yeah, we would like to have been there too, but tonight we had to leave the breadcrumbs. I'd also like to say that Teresa Ugar has been working very closely with the family of Rosemary Ruther in California. Many of you know Rosemary Ruther has had a very serious stroke. And Teresa would like to have a little caucus over on, Teresa, how about on that side of the room when we break up, to give people a little bit of an update on Rosemary's situation and ways that we might be helpful. So I think that's appropriate to do here, and I thank you very much and your colleagues, and please take our love and our care to Rosemary when you see her. Are there any other announcements? Diane New?
I am missing paper number 2 and number 4 of the signings. So you have number 2 or number 4. Can you hand it, would you look please? Also, you have a wonderful donation envelope in your water wheel. Many of you sitting in this room are fine water donors, and we thank you, thank you, thank you. It makes groups like this happen. If you are new, if you are wanting to make your donation, put it right in this envelope, hand it to me, Mary, or one of these women down at this end.
Or Katie's A.
Or Katie's A down at that end. Thank you.
And I have found papers 2 and 4, so we're fine.
You
Jennifer,
did?
Yeah,
good.
For a very different kind of intersectionality, at 8 o'clock tonight, I'm going to be the presider for the showing of Purple Rain and David Bowie's Lazarus video. And this is your opportunity to live in the world you would like to see that has dancing in it.
Yes,
It's going to be in Lone Star Sea in the Grand Hyatt. The last thing is, every year we move on to the first question, should we meet again next year? I think the answer is yes. And we need themes for each year, and we need people who need their presentation. So if you have ideas on a theme, please send them to me at Water. I'm easy to reach. Ideas for a theme for next year. Thank you all for coming and have a great day.